everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack, and today I'm going to be telling you a fascinating story about someone who has owned this 911E. This is a 1969 911E bought in the US, new in Chicago, and the current owner has had it since 1975, but we also have a history before that. So I'm just going to take it for a little bit of a drive because I haven't driven one of these older 911s for a while. We'll just get a little feel for this car, and it has a few little differences from standard as well. And then we'll take it back, and I'm going to go through and just tell you the whole history, how it ended up in the UK, and what has happened to it from new in terms of what things, because Dom has a full history of what things have been repaired, what's gone wrong over the years, all that kind of stuff. Now, I cannot figure out how to, it's just boiling in here. I can't figure out how to stop the heating, but never mind. We'll go with the window open so we'll get a bit more, hopefully, of that lovely engine noise. So these older 911s, they're just brilliant little cars, and especially on a tight and twisty road like this, they are just awesome. Of course, you do have to watch out for that notorious back end, which actually caught out the current owner as well. So back in we'll go through that, at some point in the 70s anyway, he was caught out and had to replace a couple of bits of the rear bumper when it sort of spun out. Now this 911E does have a couple of little mods from a standard one. So it has the turbo torsion springs, torsion bars, whatever you call them on these. It's still incredibly compliant though, and I think that we forget just how stiff some of the modern cars are, because, you know, this still drives really well. It's still nice and agile. The brakes are lovely. They have so much feel. The pedal is, you know, it's got nice and stiff, there's weight behind it, but you can really feel what they're doing. Honestly, when you drive the modern stuff, you have no idea how one of these older cars feels. Right, I'm just going to pull over and we can talk about everything that's happened in the 46-year history of this car. What's gone wrong? What's broken? Are these old Porsches really as reliable as people say? So let's talk a little bit about the journey that this old 911 has taken all the way from 1969 in Chicago to present day here in Oxfordshire in the UK. So from new, this has done just 72,000 miles, and that is documented obviously because Dom has owned it for a large part of its life. It was first sold in 1969 in Chicago. It then passed through a few owners, and Dom bought it in 1975. Now, in those first years, there were actually a few things that did go wrong with the car. So first of all, in 1973, both the chain tensioners had to be replaced. I think it's a part that perhaps was then upgraded over time, but it is quite unusual for it to have to be replaced so early on in a car's life. As well as that, in 1974, the clutch, which, okay, fine, that's a consumable, but also the synchros in first and second gear also had to be done. Now, I can well understand why Dom fell in love with these early 911s and wanted to buy one, but they are so pretty. It's such a pure, stunning design. And as we've been waiting here, preparing to film, two different sets of people have already stopped to talk to us about it. Everybody seems to love an early 911. Anyhow, he got this in 1975. He paid $5,000 for it, and it wasn't immediately a roaring success, because after just a couple of weeks of ownership, the front hydropneumatic suspension failed. Now, I never knew that these early 911s had hydropneumatic suspension. I think it was just the E. In any case, one side had already failed and had been replaced. When the other side failed, Dom got his neighbour, who was actually a 911 racer and had raced in Le Mans and so on. I think Applejack Racing was the team he raced with. Anyway, he had a 911S front end, so that was swapped over wholesale. And that was the sort of big thing, the first big thing that happened in 75. He did 5,000 miles in that year, so he used it a fair amount. The rest of the year, however, wasn't completely troublesome either, because on the way back from a rally to Wisconsin, I think, the CDI unit failed, I think quite late at night as well, and that was, for the time, quite an expensive repair. And indeed now Dom has even recently replaced it again and put an upgraded unit, which I think has cost about £1,000. So that has obviously been troublesome throughout the car's life. Mind you, it's been around a long time. In 1976, Dom did relatively little mileage in the 911. However, it still threw up a few little issues. So first of all, the oil tank was leaking, so they had to replace that. Secondly, the wiper mechanism seized. Not too costly though, because he took it apart himself and rebuilt it. But more importantly, I don't know if you class this as a fault of the car or not, but the infamous 911 rear end bit him. The car spun into a tree stump on this side, and this rear bumper section had to be replaced. The rear light obviously was damaged, and there was a little kink in the rear wing there in that bodywork section too. 1977 again saw very little use, but the rear conies, they were conies at the time, they were replaced, and the exhaust system. So when Dom first bought the car, already the heat exchangers had rotted through quite badly, so he knew he had to change it. And at the time, he put on the exhaust from a 911R. It wasn't a complete success, and from then on the car tended to run quite rich because you couldn't switch off, or there wasn't a mechanism to switch off the cold start. He could have wired in something mechanically, but he wasn't using the car very much. So that exhaust system was put on and stayed on for quite a few years while the car was unused. So from 77 to 85, it was used very, very little. And in 85, it went into storage because Dom moved from the US to Holland. In 99, Dom came to the UK and the 911 was finally imported in. So it had been standing for roughly 1985 to 89, so 14 years. When it got here, it went to a friend of his house who just did the general basic stuff. So, you know, new spark plugs, oil change and so on. And it just fired right up and started running perfectly. There was initially a bit of smoke coming out, but that was just the old fuel clearing. After that, it was running brilliantly. At around this time, the suspension pan and the sills were also worked on and changed because there was some rust there. And the crappy old 911R exhaust system, well, not crappy obviously, because actually was able to exchange it and get good money for it, but just didn't work with a 2-litre engine. That was exchanged for a proper, I think, American spec stainless steel exhaust system. We then get to 2005, where on his birthday, Dom was on a track day at Donington, and then the car started to misfire quite badly. He suspected there was finally a proper full meaty engine issue, but in actual fact, it wasn't that. It was just a small wiring issue. But at that point, he decided to do a full-on restoration, and this is where things started to get a bit more expensive finally, because he did a few things. So he changed to 15-inch wheels, which improved the handling greatly. That was just a cost of about £500 importing them from the US. He took it to 2+2, who did the mechanical restoration, and that cost about £5,000. Rob Watson did the fuel pump, the mechanical fuel pump rebuild and setup, and that was about £1,200. At the same time, the car was finally taken for some bodywork, so it was all completely resprayed and any rust repaired. And this is where the CD unit got replaced again for a completely upgraded new modern unit. Admittedly, it has had quite a few years off the road, but I have to say that judging on this, on the history that we have available, and Dom does have a lot of documentation, this does kind of conform to the stereotype that these old Porsches and Porsche in general were really pretty reliable and well-made things. Yes, a few surprising little things have gone off. I think the synchros and the timing chain things early on in the car's life. But apart from that, it really has had remarkably little to go wrong with it. So, fantastic little cars. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to Dom for bringing the car down, for letting me drive it, and I do really love these. And if you've got a car that you'd like me to review that you think I'd be interested in, please do let me know. And I look forward to seeing you for the next video.